welcome to the notebook. Python has always been enough. This is a recording of the presentation that I gave yesterday at the Washington GIS conference, which is held annually by WAGISA. As always, I signed up for a 25-minute slot and should have signed up for an hour, and I had to rush through the last 2 or 3 sections, which I hated. So this is hopefully a better paced presentation of what I had wanted to do, and maybe next year I won't sign up for a 25-minute slot. Okay, so moving right along, this, as always, my goal for presenting is that I really want to see presentations like this. And so I try and give the kind of presentation that I want to see. I don't know if it's the genesis or not for this, but at my last job, I was doing a lot of big data work in Databricks for geospatial things. And I had used notebooks before that time, but it was at that job that I really started using notebooks a lot. And now that I'm not at that job, right, I'm still very surprised at how few people outside of like data engineers and data scientists are using notebooks. And I think notebooks are great. I think they're super fun. So this presentation is a love letter of sorts to notebooks. And I really want to demystify them and show everyone that they are an awesome, fun tool to use. So if you didn't know, this is actually a notebook right here. This is a Python notebook using JupyterRise. And JupyterRise is alright. We just imported some libraries that we're going to use later. They take a while to import, which is why I spoke for so long, probably. Okay, so if you're watching this here on my YouTube channel, I have other videos on my YouTube channel. They're not monetized. I gave a flavor of this presentation before I had that other job where I used notebooks a lot. And if you're interested in seeing that, it's a few years old now, but as always, it's fun. I mean, I think it's fun. Sometimes I listen to my own YouTube videos. Not all the time. Maybe that's weird. I shouldn't have said anything. Alright, moving right along. If you had not guessed already, this is the notebook themed presentation. Yeah, so this is the part of the presentation, right, where someone will get up and they'll say something like, oh, these are all the things that I've done, or I've been in the industry for X amount of years, so I'm a specialist and you should listen to me, and blah, blah, blah. I think that's super boring, but I also understand that now that I've moved thousands of miles away, there are a lot of people that don't know anything about me. So I do have to like, hey, I know what I'm talking about a little bit, or at least I have some context from which to talk about things. So that's what's here. Anyway, I really hate reading off of slides. I'm not going to do it. The slides are for you to read while I'm talking and think about, I guess. They're mostly funny things. Anyway, it's the notebook themed presentation. So I think that's probably all the exposition that I have. Everything else will be focused on actually the presentation material. This is a signpost. Hey, look, we're signposting, yay! And these are actually the things that we're going to cover. So I'm very happy, very excited about that. Okay, so if you have never used a Python notebook, right, then perhaps these are some of the places that you might have used Python. I'm not sure how you use Python in your day-to-day, so I'm just going to throw out here a few things of what I use Python for in these very specific arenas. Yeah, I guess here, okay, so I had a lot of conversations after my presentation with people that saw my presentation, and so I'm gonna insert some things in here that I think are probably beneficial. One is key rings are super cool for keeping secrets. However, what's even more super cool is a secrets manager with an API. So if your organization has access to an API-based secrets manager, you should totally use that instead of keyring. Keyring is super annoying to keep up to date on your dozens of VMs if you're like me and have dozens of VMs. Anyway, I don't like using terminal because it's, I don't know, my terminal is cool and all that, but I'm a very visual person and it's not visual enough for me. If you've been in the ArcMap world at all, then you've seen idle, and normally you're like, okay, I'm just gonna fix this one thing, and then this one thing spirals into a very much not one thing, and then you waste hours of your time. And that probably is a somewhat relatable experience. But yeah, so there's idle. I think idle looks gross. In the presentation, I described this as looking like barf. I stand by that comment. I don't like the idle shell. Anyway, this is the Python analysis window, as it is now called, in ArcGIS Pro. The current release is 3.7. It was released like a week ago, 2 weeks ago now. And in the last several releases, the Python analysis window has gotten really good with the hinting and the inline documentation. It's super great, huge fan. It's awesome. However, right, the same kind of thing of like when you're working in terminal, I don't know, like, do you do shift enter? Do you do double enter? I always feel like I get tripped up on it. And again, it's helpful for very small things or for quickly looking something up, but it's not my favorite. Now we're moving right along into the when, where, and how of using Python notebooks. So, when to use the notebook. And you'll see here a menu of sorts, right? Like, I'm doing X. Should I blah, blah, blah? And the answer for all of these is yes, mostly. Yes, mostly. I did this presentation in a notebook. It was horrible to do. I mean, it's PowerPoint's you just drag and drop, blah, blah, blah. Way easier. You'll see, I mean, we can look at it right here. Look at this. This is Markdown. Markdown's great. But the rest of these slides, we'll open up a few other ones. They're just like a mishmash of HTML and Markdown because I wanted them to look pretty, and Markdown does look pretty to a point, and then you have to start doing fancy things, and that kind of defeats the purpose. I don't want to have to do fancy verbose things. I just want it to look kind of pretty. So if I did this again, I probably wouldn't do it as a presentation, right? I'd do it in a PowerPoint. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it is you can use a notebook for just about everything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should use a notebook for just about anything. However, if you want to, right, then this presentation is to show you all the things that you might want to do to make that happen. So where might one use the notebook, right? So in the Esri verse, you're going to generally use the notebook in ArcGIS Pro or arcgisonline. This presentation, I'm going to very much recommend using notebooks inside of the Jupyter environment outside of an ArcGIS GUI, and especially inside of an integrated development environment, an IDE. And if you're going to use an IDE, use VS Code. Just use VS Code. There are other cool places to use notebooks like Google Colab and Marimo. I'm not going to talk about them, although they are pretty cool, beyond the scope of this presentation. Anyway, so that's that for right now. We're moving right along. So I've got lots of beefs with ArcGIS notebooks, as they are called, inside of ArcGIS Pro, and that's okay, right? It is super hard to integrate stuff into other software that is not that stuff. So, not to dog on the developers, they're doing an awesome job. So, love me some Esri developers. But I am also, not but, and I am also going to be a little brutally honest on what some of the shortcomings are as of right now, right? We're in 3.7. Anyway, the biggest thing to call out here is that the Python kernel that runs the Jupyter Notebook is the same kernel that's running inside of this software, right? It's not separate. At 3.8, at ArcGIS Pro 3.8, they are going to offer an option to spin up an additional kernel that will be separate from the software kernel, and that's awesome. But as of right now, 3.7, that is not the case. So this leads to some interesting behavior. Also, notebooks load very slowly, and the text formatting is kind of wonky. And I say that as, if you're coming from like a text editor, you might be asking yourself, what even is text formatting? And it's all these cool color-based hints, ways of organizing your code that makes it more intelligible and legible, and it makes things click. And we'll see some examples of that, but I just want to throw that out there, that text formatting on its face is like, well, why is that a deal breaker? And it's once you have it and you start using it, you really appreciate it, and you wonder how you were ever able to do anything without it. And that's kind of where I'm at. That's where I'm at. I love text formatting. I think it's great. So another place that you can use ArcGIS, can use a Jupyter Notebook, is inside of ArcGIS Online. And the limitations here, constraints, let's just use the word constraints, are the use of credits, right? So if you want to schedule a notebook, you're going to use credits. If you want to have a notebook kernel that has access to the ArcPy library, you're going to use more credits, right? You're going to use credits just to have the notebook open and just to be running it. And then, of course, if you want access to like GPU-enabled notebooks, you're going to pay credits as well, right? From the moment it opens, you're paying credits. And the reason for that, and the reason for the session timeouts, and the reason for limited access to local files, is that these notebooks are not local, right? What's happening on the back end is when you're in ArcGIS Online and you're like, hey, I'm going to open a notebook, what is actually happening on the back end is that it is spinning up a container. And a container is a virtualized machine. So you're in essence spinning up a Linux computer that has all of these scripts on it to load up your Python environment and everything else, and then boom, you have access to a notebook. And so by default, a container does not just exist all the time. It can exist all the time, but that's expensive, and ArcGIS Online is a huge place. So if they had just a billion containers spun up all the time, it would be very expensive for them. So for sure, they're going to have session timeouts. So after like 10, 15-ish minutes, your container, your notebook is going to get interrupted, and everything you're working on in it is not saved because the container is gone. There's no way to like back it up. The most you can do is highlight the text that's already in the browser page and then like copy paste that. Anyway, I'm getting down a rabbit hole on this. Notebooks in arcgisonline are in containers, and that leads to some interesting things. So a better place, I think, to use notebooks and to develop notebooks is inside of the Jupyter ecosystem, right? So we're talking about Jupyter Notebook, Jupyter Lab, the various extensions that you can install for Jupyter. And lastly, my favorite is just to use the notebook in an IDE like VS Code, right? Everything that I'm going to show you in this presentation can be done and look nicer and look better and have more options inside of an IDE. So I love that development is natively available inside Jupyter. Jupyter is great. Your organization might not want you to use an IDE or might not let you download extensions in an IDE. But generally, most GIS shops here in the US are Esri shops and Microsoft shops. So you should be able to, assuming that your security stance is not like overly aggressive, you should have access to VS Code to do these things. But if you didn't, right, then you would use just regular Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Notebook, and that's kind of everything that I'm going to show about. Anyway, but everything's better in an IDE. I love an IDE. We'll look at my IDE a little bit later, and hopefully it'll click. So lastly is like how should one use the notebook? And I get that we haven't even like seen a notebook yet other than this presentation, which is a notebook. So we'll look at that as well. I'll talk about it right after that. Well, I'll talk about it right now. Okay, so why do we use notebooks? You know, and the reason why I started to use notebooks is because the Python debugger scared me, and I didn't think that I was like smart enough to use a debugger. So I really enjoyed inside of a notebook that you have these cells and you can run a cell over and over, and you can inspect variables and all these kinds of things that let you really just noodle around and kind of dig into the mechanics of what you're doing. Something that previous to notebooks that really kind of bugged me is when I was writing Python scripts, like I would try and figure out this thing, but then I'd have to run the whole script to do it, and it just took like a long time, or I'd write just a ton of print statements because again I didn't know what I was doing, and just writing a ton of print statements, which is fine, right? That's like something you have to do. But now that we have like this type documentation and hinting and all that stuff, a lot of that's kind of built into the process now. But that's kind of where I got into notebooks and why I like them so much, is because they're very visual, that's instant feedback, and you don't have to run the entire process to iterate on a section of your code. Anyway, so for me personally, right, as I talked about, right, I do prototyping inside of notebooks, and if I have to do something on like an interval that is 3 months or more, I'm going to put it in a notebook, because I just have a terrible memory and I'm not going to remember how to do it. A, B, I'm not going to understand the context behind the process. So Jupyter notebooks have Markdown. We're looking at a Markdown cell right here, right? We can look at this Markdown cell. Let's look at it. Cool, right? I mean, that's Very, very simple. I really like that. Oh, anyway, so they've got these markdown cells, so it really lends itself to documentation, and you can write out all sorts of notes to explain, like, hey, what you have to do here, what's the gotchas, and if there are any manual portions, you can like write out step by step all the manual portions that you might need to do. And perhaps you've seen the XKCD comic where it's like a graph of how long something, how often you do something, and how long it takes to do, right, dictates how much time and effort automating the process will pay off for. And I would argue actually that that's an incorrect way to look at it, right? If you want to get good at programming, I don't care if it takes you 20 hours to automate a task that you can do in 2 hours, and you only do that task once a year. That 20 hours that you're putting into that work, right, is going to build your skill level to attack other problems. So automate everything. Take the time to automate everything, and then when someone complains and asks you, hey, why did you do this thing, you can hand them a shiny notebook and be like, yeah, look how nice this is. Isn't this so nice? And then also, I think it's really cool as well to have these for people that are, I don't know, you consider them power users, I guess, of, hey, here's this thing, and it's got step-by-step instructions, and you just run the cells, or you just change this one variable, and it does the thing you want it to do. And I have done this with a lot of users in my organization that are not like Python programmers, and they've really taken well to it. So I'm a huge fan of giving people Python notebooks to do workflows. Okay, so all of that aside, what this presentation, right, is about, what this presentation is about is like, what are the gotchas of working with notebooks, and how do we work with notebooks in a way that makes sense? Oop, nope, let's go, we gotta go up, there we go. How do we work with notebooks in a way that makes sense, and that makes working with notebooks fun? And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to make it fun. See, look at this. I had to bake some HTML to it. It was so gross. That's why I mean, I don't know. It shouldn't be that hard. Sometimes it's hard. All right. Anyway, we're gonna do gotchas to watch out for. And yeah, so the first gotcha is the idea that run order determines the state. And what I mean by that is like count, right? Count is 0. If we do count plus equals 1 and print it, it's going to be 1. And then it's going to be 2, 3, 4, whatever, 5. Here it is. It's 5 again. But if you went back here, right, and ran this again, and then skipped this and ran that one, count's going to equal 0, right? Because we didn't run this one in between. And these little numbers on the side, they're the whatever, nth run of in an index, right? So this was run at position 10 of an index. This was run at position 12 and technically position 11 as well. This one is run at position 13. So if you ignore these little numbers and you start jumping around your notebook, you could get yourself into a position where the output is not what you expected it to be because you didn't run your cells in the right order. And that goes into this whole thing of like, nothing's unexpected here, right? You're telling a computer what to do, and it's going to do the things you tell it to do, but you really have to understand what it is that you're telling your computer to do. So up here, right, this is pathlib, and at 3.7 we now have pathlib support, which is great. If you have not used pathlib, you should totally use pathlib. It's way easier. It's way easier for paths. You don't have to worry about like which slash is this, is a forward slash, is this a backslash. I still don't know the difference. Anyway, so pathlib has a function called resolve, right? And so what it will do, it's like, so the dot is like, hey, whatever this current directory is, right? And then you're resolving it that. And so it's like, oh, hey, you're in the notebook directory on your C drive, and it's in your OneDrive, and blah, 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 blah. Right, so if you were trying to give someone an APRX with some notebooks attached to it, right, and you want to do some stuff, and you're like, okay, well, if I give them this APRX, then I know the thing is going to be in here, right? But you don't know, like, where are they going to deploy that APRX? So using something like resolve, you're like, okay, great. We'll just call this in our code function, and I don't have to hard code any strings, and it'll just work to however they have their stuff set up. And you would be right if you opened up an APRX, right? But if your user opened up arcgispro from like the taskbar or the system search, the resolved path for the Python kernel is actually going to be at Windows System 32, right? Because that's where the arcgispro program is at, right? So it's interesting. So if you do something like that, you just have to know, like, hey, that's a gotcha, and tell your user or tell your coworkers that they need to double click the APRX if they want the stuff to work as advertised. So I like the Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other. So in a regular Jupyter space, right, or in your IDE, if you spin up multiple notebooks, you have multiple independent notebooks. However, right, in arcgispro, because there is only the one kernel, what is actually happening is that any variable names that are shared between notebooks are actually going to reference the same thing. So where we would expect this to say hello world, right, because we've changed X in that other notebook, X in this notebook is going to read Washington, right? And that is unexpected, but that is yeah, so that's the whole variable state confusion. Again, something to watch out for, especially if you have a bunch of favorite variables that you use between all of your notebooks. It could be not good if you have multiple notebooks open at the same time. And speaking of multiple notebooks open at the same time, if you leave a notebook open as a tab and that's the focus of your APRX, it is going to take a very long time to load up. And yeah, so don't, if you have a notebook or whatever, just don't have it left as the focus. And it will also just like take a long time to load up, whatever. That's kind of the price of having it integrated into ArcGIS-Pro. Again, which is fine, right? I think it's cool that you can access it through that program, but this is the tax you pay for doing that. Okay, so I'm from Texas, and I've got some folksy sayings, and what I'm getting to here, right, is that there's a reason that programmers like to, at least me, right, have one of their monitors put in a portrait orientation, and it's because we're trying to get as much of the code into our visual space as possible, so it stays in our, meat brain's working memory. And the problem, right, with a Jupyter notebook, regardless of where you're looking at it in, is that it only has so much space, right? So the longer it gets, and there's spacing between cells, and then there's even more spacing between cells whenever you have outputs, is that just forces the code up in a way and outside of your visual space, which for most of us will just push it right out of our working memory. So the rule of thumb here is keep your notebooks short. If you have a very long notebook, you're not going to have a good time. I don't have a good time when I have long notebooks, and I have long notebooks. So it's something that probably will happen, and it's not great. So try to avoid it if you can. I mean, you'll come to hate yourself, and you will eventually start avoiding it. I'm just trying to give you a heads up first that you can spare yourself from the heartache if you want. And another gotcha to be, concerned about with notebooks is that there are lots of keyboard shortcuts, which are cool. I love a keyboard shortcut. However, right, when you can accidentally run one or more cells, it means you could accidentally run one or more cells, and if you don't have a development environment, or if like your production is your development environment, you could break some things, especially if you're not running your cells in the correct order, right? You could be inadvertently pushing a lot of changes that you weren't expecting to do because you spammed the shift enter 1 or 10 too many times. Not that I've done exactly that several times. Okay, so those are probably the big gotchas to know about if you're just coming from I write .py files, or I only have ever looked at the terminal. Stuff to be aware of, because there's not really an analog to that in those other formats. Okay, so my favorite part, and this is like why I wanted to do this presentation in the first place, is what are the quality of life tweaks that you should make that make notebooks easier, more fun, better to use. First, I will continue harping on this, and hopefully it'll make sense when we start looking at it a little bit, is just use VS Code. Just use VS Code. It's so great. It's got all the things, and it's fantastic. So use VS Code. But if you're not going to use VS Code, or you cannot use VS Code, then let's talk about what makes notebooks more usable in the different arenas or formats that you could use them. So first, ArcGIS Online. These are 3 things that are actually very new for me, and I avoided using ArcGIS Online as a development platform, or when I hated myself the whole time I was doing it, because I just kept running into things that would hold me back and things that made development frustrating. And now I've figured out things that make it not so frustrating. So the first are futures. And again, this is like me and debugging of like, oh no, I'm not smart enough to use a future. I don't know what that is. And it was really not too hard. Here you're just using submit, and then the name of the function, and then the parameters of that function, right? And so this makes a future object, and then you're trying to call done on it. And if done doesn't get called, you're going to stay in this loop, right? And because your notebook is in a container in ArcGIS Online, if you use this parameter in your print statement, who knew that print statements had parameters that weren't just like the content? If you do flush equals true, then it's going to send a signal to the kernel inside of the container saying, hey, like, we did a thing, so don't turn off, right? So then we call a sleep timer for 2 minutes, and then we check again if it's done, right? And if it's not done, it's going to do the same thing over and over. So this is actually called a heartbeat, and then once it is done, right, then for this specific function, we're pulling the result from the future and then loading that into a variable. So 10 out of 10 would recommend futures, and this is what that looks like in practice. So I've been doing stuff with item dependency graphs, and so I've built an item dependency graph that took about 3 hours, 3 hours to build, and I was able to do it inside of a browser tab, right, using a heartbeat. So that's pretty cool. If I had not used a heartbeat, chances are my container would have actually spun down before this function had finished. And so there's a way to avoid that, and that's the way to avoid that. The next function here is execute notebook, and what I like about execute notebook is that it allows you to run a notebook. It allows you to run a notebook, which means you can, from your local machine, you can log into your ArcGIS Online or your ArcGIS Enterprise account using whatever credentialing you're using inside of the ArcGIS library, and then run a notebook. So you don't even have to like schedule your notebook on ArcGIS Online. You can just schedule whatever script or notebook you've got on-prem on your local computer, and then call the execute of that notebook. And this can also return a future, and so you can wait for it to return like whatever thing you need it to return. But that's cool. That's totally cool, is that you can remotely run notebooks without being inside of ArcGIS Online. And then the last thing is notebook data access. And so we were talking about containers, right? And I don't know if you've like tried to use the file system inside of ArcGIS Online for notebooks. It's really tedious of like, how do I even get stuff in here, right? And I think that's the point. It's like, they're not trying to like, hey, put stuff in here. It's, hey, this is your working space, and when you need to output working things, you can output them here and then download them onto your local, right? But if you needed something from your local into ArcGIS Online, like you gotta make an item and then consume an item. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. So there is a way to actually generate the URL and then upload whatever local file into that URL, which is like, it's gonna be like an Azure storage blob or something. Anyway, so if you need to get stuff from local to your container, you totally can, and that's how you do it. And of course, I'm not smart enough to know how to do this thing, but there are smarter people than I, fortunately for the rest of the world, and for myself. So yeah, that community post details exactly how to do it, but the long and short of it right here is this little snippet. Okay, moving right along, and so that's like, why do we even care about notebooks? Probably is maybe a question that I should have started the presentation with, and I think that the reason why I like notebooks is, oh man, I thought we imported this. Yeah, we'll just import it right now. We'll just do it right now. I'm gonna talk anyway. I have no time limits today, right? That's just me and a video that I'm not gonna do any post-processing on. So we're just gonna be here. We're just gonna be here waiting. It's gonna take a little while for those libraries to load in. Oh man, it's gonna do like a gosh, whatever. It's gonna be some URL warnings. That's okay. I'm not worried about it. Well, I'm a little worried about it. Here, let's fix this real quick. This is cool though, right? We're just gonna go right back along, and yep, here's the thing. I thought this ran. This did not run. Okay, so now it's gonna run. There's like a bug because of the way that the ArcGIS library handles data ingestion. It's gonna spit out a bunch of warnings, and I don't like that. It's gonna look not good. I mean, we can see shortly how good it doesn't look. And you can go, oh yeah, that doesn't look good. I'm like, yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah, see what there. Okay, now so there was even there was even other things I'd messed up on. That's okay. Okay. Ugh. There we go. I really thought we did. Whatever. Let's see. There we go. Did I just not run it? Let's do this. I'm so glad that. Okay. So I should have just ran. Okay. That's okay. I know how to use computers. Oh, nope. Sorry. There we go. Let's try this again. Okay. One of the reasons why I love notebooks is because of data frames. And data frames are like tables. And also why, anyway, so they're like tables, and once you start using them, you're like, whoa, these are super, super useful. And you might be wondering, well, what do you mean useful? I use ArcPy, and ArcPy is pretty cool. Yeah. No. Okay, so if you're using ArcPy, right, it's like, all right, I want to know what fields are in this feature class. So you're like, oh, good, there's a function for that. We're going to list fields. And then it returns you all these field objects. And you're like, oh, man, I forgot that it's a field object. And so I've got to, like, you know, oh, what is it? There, you got to remember attributes and the name and the type of field it is. And so, boom, there you go, right? And then you've got all your field names and the types there are. But I mean, that's kind of a lot of work. And anything that I do in programming, it's like, can I just do less work here? And so if you wanted that same information, but from a data frame, you just need to do D types, right? And that's going to list your columns and what type they are, right? Or you can just do like columns, right? And oh, look at this, and just like an array, a list of what all the column names are. Kind of cool. Anyway, data frames. Data frames are great. Pandas, polars, both of those are all about data frames. And data frames is what everyone in data science and data engineering, that's like their bread and butter. That's what everyone else is using. So, yeah. But when you're using, it's a pandas thing, right? When you're using your data frames, right? What is going to happen if you have let's see, more than 18 columns. If you have more than 18 columns, you are going to run into this issue, right? It's like, oh no, where are the missing columns? What's this ... And then if you look at this, right, we got the same kind of thing in the middle of like, oh, where's the missing rows? Just ... Anyway, you can set these. It took me a very long time to figure out, like, oh, hey, you can set those, right? So now we put the max columns as none. So it's going to show you all the columns of your data frame. And if this was just a little bit longer, there'd be a little side scrolly bar here that you could look at, and you could scroll all the way to the right or to the left. But you figure out real quick, like, oh man, this table's really wide, you know, and you start thinking maybe tables shouldn't be so wide. Anyway, so you can do the same thing with rows, right? But if you do none, then it's going to load all like 14,500 of these rows into this, and it's going to give you a cool little scroll bar. But that's also like a ton of, not a ton of memory. That's more memory that you're consuming just to have a table, right? And it's going to bog you down. So I would not put it at none, but maybe some other reasonable number that's not none. And what other, you know, we can do other cool things, right? We can head. Yay, there's the first 5 records. There's the last 5 records. That's cool. Anyway, data frames. Data frames are super fun. Okay, so I wanted to show this part inside of the Rise presentation, but it won't render, and that's because other stuff is happening that is not going to render. So we're just going to pop out of this real quick and go into the actual, this is the actual notebook, and these are the Rise slides. I don't know if you heard that. I've got a small dog that thinks he's a very large dog. And let's see where are we at. Okay. So this I didn't know about, and I'm always happy to out myself and be like, I didn't know this, and that's fine. There's tons of stuff that I don't know. Is nothing loaded? Let's just okay. This hasn't happened before. But we have a kernel. Our kernel's right there. Okay. We can figure this out. Can we just do F5? Yeah. Okay. It's gonna mess some stuff up, but that's okay. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Yes. So, there we go. That's good. And we're just gonna have to import everything again, I think. Well. Oh. Why did that? Okay. Oh. Okay. Cool. All right. Sorry. Okay, so this is called a data grid. I did not know what a data grid was until I was doing research on this presentation, because I was just like, oh, data frames are cool, but you can't really sort them unless you use pandas stuff, and that's just the tax. No, but there's a bunch of people that like their entire job is actually inside of notebooks. So things that I thought were like part of like you just have to deal with it a few years ago. There are actually tons of tools and tons of development happening in the space because a lot of people are having to deal with this, and people don't deal with dumb stuff if they don't have to. So all of that to say, this is a data grid, and for all of my ArcGIS people out here, you'll see like, oh, you can sort stuff? Yeah, you can. Oh man, you can filter by values. Look at that. It already knows all the unique values. How cool is that? There's like a bazillion unique values here. Or you can do whatever, conditions, right? Like, hey, look, oh man, isn't that so cool? So cool. Anyway, so why would you want the attribute, why would you want ArcGIS Pro open? Why would you want the attribute table open when you can do your quick and dirties in here? Anyway, that's a data grid. And we'll continue right along here for a moment. So you can, as you can see from the text on the screen, I don't actually do this. And the reason why is that your shape column is just a column, right? If you're not doing analysis or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? It's just part of the data, just like the rest of this stuff is part of the data. It doesn't really matter unless like you need it to matter and you're doing stuff. And then if you're doing stuff, you're going to use the appropriate tool for the job. But if you like never wanted to leave a notebook ever for whatever reason, you could look inside of a map in your notebook. Look at this. But my beef with this, right, is that if you want your notebook to be usable, I'm like, oh man, why can't I click it? And while I do like green semi-transparent circles, right, it's like, what if I wanted something else, right? So if you wanted to have pop-up content, right, you are going to need to add 4 lines of code. And this is like, right, and a list comprehension. And that took me forever to wrap my head around. List comprehensions. Anyway, so you're going to need 4 lines of code and a list comprehension just to have the same kind of experience that you'd have if you opened up a map inside of AGO or something, And that's cool, right? I mean, I'm sure you could like make a little function for this and like have a notebook with all your like mapping functions, and I'm sure people do that. I'm not going to do that. That's not really what I'm doing, right? The work that I'm doing is not this. And if I were doing this kind of work, I don't know, maybe I'd make functions. It's just bleh. It's bleh, and I don't want to use it, and I'm not going to use it, and I don't use it. but for the sake of showing, hey, notebooks are really cool, you can make a map in a notebook. Okay, anyway, code folding. Can we move? Yeah, let's move back into the actual presentation. Boop, 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 boop. Nope, nope. Oh, I'm gonna spoil all the jokes, you know? Okay, data frames are cool, thank you. See, look, it's like, yeah, that's a map widget. Isn't that what you wanted? No, not quite. Okay, so again, this goes back to like, okay, so you could make a bunch of functions in like cell number 1, but maybe you need like a dozen functions to do what you want to do. Well, there's this thing called code folding, and code folding is really cool. You have this little caret right here, and if you undo the caret, look, you scoop up all of this extra space, and now you don't have to see like what is in the function. It just works. So you could have a bunch of functions or have a super long function, you know, whatever, and then fold it up into the code, and then it should reduce the amount of space that the cell takes up, which is cool, right? It's because we don't want super long notebooks. And then also like, well, what if we have to have a really long notebook? So you would make a markdown table of contents, and this is something I'm going to have to show you on this page. So you click on one of these, and it's just like a hyperlink. It's just like a hyperlink. Why is this not hyperlink? It's just like a hyperlink. Did it all the way over here. No? Yes? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here, sign post. Shine dash post. Okay. Yeah. They're internal hyperlinks, and maybe it's not working because I have this maybe it's not working because I'm using Markdown on top of Markdown, blah blah, whatever. See? Yeah, maybe it's that. Okay. You should be able to click on this. I am a little perturbed that it's not working the way that I think it should be working, because it's in Markdown, whatever. Anyway, we can look at some stuff in IDE. But the idea is just like in a really long, whatever, Word document or something, you would have a table of contents that you can jump around to. You can do the same thing here, right? Of have different parts of your notebook that you can jump to depending on why you need to go to that notebook. And then if you're super kind, right, you would have a return to table of contents button after every section, so people don't have to scroll all the way up. And so that's cool, especially if you're in ArcGIS or ArcGisonline. But if you're in Jupyter, right, or if you're in your IDE, they have a built-in table of contents. Look at that. Every little slide we've done, it's all here, and you can, and this actually works, right? So here, this works. Boom! How cool is that? Pretty cool. Anyway, so a markdown table of contents. Moving right along, so there are extensions to Jupyter, right? The slideshow, as we talked about, that is an extension. There's other things. PyTutor opens up a separate window, and then you can like highlight functions, and it'll explain the functions and have links to stuff. I haven't used it, but if you were wanting to do more with notebooks, but you're also in the same boat of like, man, I just want to be better at Python, then PyTutor would be really great for you, and I would recommend it. And then the last thing is, right, like a variable inspector. Like, what is a variable inspector? So everything that we have done here, right, in the notebook, let me just open variable inspector. That's because I've just run those two things. Okay. Anyway, so every variable that you have open in your kernel in state is going to appear here, right? And it'll tell you exactly what is in that variable and how big it is and what type it is, all those kinds of things. And that's cool. So especially if you're trying to, whatever, if you got some stuff that you're debugging and you don't know and or want to use a Python debugger, you can certainly use the variable inspector to figure out like what's going on and is this thing what I think it is, stuff like that. Okay, moving right along. See, and this there's no way I was ever going to be able to do this presentation in 20 minutes with 5 minutes for questions and 5 minutes to transfer to the next presenter. It was a fever dream. It was a fever dream that I thought I could do it. Anyway, if you're interested in more extensions, there is this more extensions. So you just Google Jupyter Lab extensions. Okay, so Notebook Magic. Notebook Magic is pretty great. And I didn't know anything about Notebook Magic until I got my data engineering job. And then because we were in Databricks, everything is in notebooks and there's not any like a Python, a .py file to use or anything like that. So I went from like being real happy and priding myself and like, man, I write .py files and I do version control and I'm doing all the things, to like, okay, you can only write notebooks. I'm like, how do you only write notebooks? And so you can do it with Notebook Magic. And Notebook Magic is awesome. So this magic here is called Run Magic. And it will run a notebook, right? So this will work inside of arcgisPro, right? Because it's local and it's on your file. But if you wanted to have this work inside of arcgisonline, then you would have to upload the Python notebook, not to arcgisonline, but you'd have to upload the Python notebook into your notebook container storage, the Azure blob we were talking about earlier. So if you uploaded your Python file, your Python notebook into the notebook containers, into the blob storage of the notebook container, right? Then you could do Run Magic just like that. Otherwise, you would need to do like execute notebook inside of arcgisonline, which you could totally do. You could totally do it like that. But Run Magic is really cool. So if you needed to effectively build a pipeline, you could say, and you're like, I don't want to write a really long notebook. Like, good for you. Don't write a really long notebook. But I'm going to write 5 notebooks, and they're going to call each other. It's like, oh, child, yes, you can do that. Please don't do that, but yes, you can, right? So then you could have like 4 more cells that each call like another file, and that would be, that's how you could have a pipeline with notebooks. You could do a notebook pipeline. Okay. So other things you can do, again, so inside Databricks, you had like different types of notebooks. You could have like a SQL notebook, and then you could have a Python notebook, but then you could call Python in your SQL notebook or call SQL in your Python notebook. So with the Jupyter that we have inside of ArcGISPro, we don't like have a SQL kernel, but you can use SQL Magic. You can use SQL Magic to run straight SQL inside of your notebook, right? So if you're like really like, oh man, I'm so good at SQL, good for you. You know, spatial is SQL. It's just SQL with a shaped column. Anyway, so it uses SQL Alchemy. I mean the ArcPy kernel deployment, it uses SQL Alchemy. So you would put a path to your database, right? This is a mobile geodatabase. Only because I couldn't get my geo package to work correctly with the output to feature class. Maybe there's a GitHub issue in my future for that. Anyway, so you create the engine, and then you use your SQL magic here, and then you call the variable here. So you're like, yo, SQL magic connect to this engine, right? And then we're also going to configure our SQL magic to only display 10 items, okay? So what that means, oh, can we just clear? No, okay. So what that means, right, is we can write this double percent modulus, right, is going to say, hey, I'm going to write SQL in a multi-line fashion. If you only have one of these, then you have to write all your SQL in line, which you could do if you're a monster, but if you don't want to be that person, then you don't have to be that person, right? Anyway, so here we've written a SQL statement to be like, oh, hey, let's find all these cleanup sites that are just in Bellevue, right? And we're gonna there's a record for every status of the cleanup, right? So we're gonna say, hey, we only want one record per cleanup, and we want it to be the most recent status, right? And that's cool. And so you could do that with like definition queries and stuff, or if you're a real cool kid, you can write SQL if you want. Anyway, so yeah, and then it returns a data frame. So you could then, whatever, you could output this as a variable and then return it as like a data grid if you wanted. Anyway, you can also install other kernels, right? So there's the R bridge for arcgisPro. You can install an R kernel in Jupyter, right? And write R code in a notebook and do R stuff inside of arcgis if you wanted. Anyway, I thought the joke was going to be funnier than it was, but it was not. Anyway, so there's another magic here called who and whose. So who is one variable, the last variable that you've made, and then whose is all the things that you've done inside of this session, right? So these are all the variables and all the functions that are in memory right now, and that's what this cool little piece of magic does. Is it shows you all the things, and that's cool. Okay, and then you can do pip magic, and if you know anything, yeah, you might not know. You might not know that the kernel inside of arcgisPro is managed by Conda, the Conda distribution, and Conda and pip do not that they don't play nice, but they use different mechanisms to source their libraries and to check dependencies and stuff like that. So if you have Conda, your recipe might be very dependent on having libraries that are exactly some kind of version. And if you just pip install stuff, it's going to install whatever version it wants to on top of your things. So it has the possibility of breaking your kernel, and which one is why you should just always make your own kernel, and two, maybe not even utilize the. I mean, I just utilize a standalone Conda environment and get it from Esri's channel. I don't bother with the in GUI stuff. However, the in GUI stuff has made lots of improvements and strides again over the last few releases. So totally doable. Anyway, so you can do pip magic, and what pip magic will do is at runtime it will install the thing, which would be very helpful if you're running notebooks inside of, let's say, ArcGIS Online, because when you spin up your notebook, you have a fresh new container, and that fresh new container is only going to have the libraries and dependencies that are put on it by the initialization script that the Esri engineers have written, right? So it's not going to have, if you need like some special library that is not part of the standard kernel, you are going to have to pip install it. And so you can, right? And you can do this at runtime. So if you have libraries that your script depends on, you can have a cell or cells that pip install all the things that you need to do, right? And it's going to do the thing, and hopefully it doesn't break your kernel that you're trying to use. But it is, again, that's one of the things that we had to do in Databricks, is either pip install all of our things or create an init script, that like installs the stuff. But you could have like kernels that persisted, and so you could open up a notebook and have it point to like a kernel, and it would have all the things in it that you wanted to have in it. Anyway, so pip magic is cool. All this did is like make sure the variable inspector was installed, which we already saw it, we already looked at it, no big deal. Okay, so this other magic is called history, and what the history magic does is it shows every run and function thing that you've done, and maybe it'll look better if we do it in this one. Can we do that? Oh, can we do that? Oh, almost. Whew, man, I'm ruining all the jokes. Okay, yeah, look at that, look at that. So it does not have an inline scroll, which is why it didn't look good in our presentation. But look, this shows every single run that we ran so far in this presentation, right? And like everything that we did. So again, if you're running into some weird bugs, right, because your cells are out of order or something like that, it might be useful to take a look at the history thing and see what happened. Or like, let's say you had some written down, then you wanted to change it, and so you rewrote it, and then you ran it again, and be like, oh, what was the original thing? Having history is going to show you, oh, what was the original thing that we just deleted, right? And that's cool as well. Again, would only be useful for your current session, or because it's an output, it'll persist, but if you run it again, you'll lose whatever was there. So it's powerful and also fragile, I guess. Oh, sorry, that dog just does not know. Like, do I want to go in? Do I want to go out? Anyway, so, all right, so that is history magic. That's magic. In a nutshell, that is magic. And magic is cool. So now we're going to talk about effective version control. And this is something that was the bane of my existence at my previous job, and I think what I ended up doing was like copy pasting every cell into like a .py file and then saving that to version control. And you might be saying like, why would you do that? Why can't you just version your notebook? And you can, right? But first, like, we got to get to the joke, which is, you should version your code. And I don't know if it's like every GIS person or just like a lot of the GIS people that I have spoken to. It's like this aversion, get it, to versioning their code, and I don't understand it, because I have screwed up so much of my own code by making a change that I thought was good and then saving and then realizing it's not good and then not being able to roll back and then losing like weeks of work because I didn't know what a version control was, and then like finding like whatever, a snippet of a copy that I emailed someone, and I'm like, oh great, that I didn't lose 3 weeks of work, I lost a week of work. Anyway, so version control fixes all of that. It allows you to save checkpoints on your code. It allows you to roll back to a point in your code. It allows you to annotate why code changes were made. And it's just fantastic. It's totally fantastic. So sometimes, right, sometimes I'm the Gosling, right? Like, yo, please just commit your code. Please, just commit your code. Can you just commit that code? And then this is about the reaction that I get And I don't know, like maybe people haven't had like the same horrible experiences that I've had on losing everything in your code, or wondering 6 months from now why I did something and not understanding why me from 6 months ago would be so stupid as to do that thing. But that's me. That's me all the time. So getting to the point of why this is load magic, by the way. So if you were to use load magic on just a .py file, it's going to just ingest the whole .py file in a single cell, right? So you're like, oh cool, I've got this notebook, so can I just ingest my notebook as a whole single cell? And the answer is yes, you can. But this is what your notebook looks like, because your notebook is not actually a cool thing with Python in it. Your notebook is like a JavaScript thing with text in it that we call Python, right? And so this is what your stuff looks like. And if I could take a second to show you, here we go. So here is a sample commit of, here, can we open this in source? See, we use Bitbucket. I'm not a fan of Bitbucket. There's an extension that you can download in Bitbucket for your organization. We just switched to a different tenant, so I don't have that here anymore. So you can't just like look in GitHub. You could, or in GitLab you could. Like, hey, I want to look at my notebook like a notebook. Done. It'll render it like that. Atlassian, for all their money that they have, apparently can't figure out how to do things that other mainstream service providers do. Anyway, so this is what your version control looks like, and if you were to make a change to said version control, can we do that? We have to go back to commits. We have to go back to commits. Okay, so here you might not know it's a cell, and the output says here's the cell, right? The cell says import these things, then print hello world, and then the output of that hello world is somewhere, right? Oh, here's the output, hello world. And then I'm like, oh hey, also ingest this spatially enabled data frame, right? And so that's what the notebook looks like. So if you were to rerun that notebook in your version control and then save it, right, it's going to start like, oh hey, you didn't run this cell at all, and so it went from being cell count 1 to no cell count, so that's a diff right there. And then, oh hey, you changed hello world to hello Washington, so that's a diff. Oh, and then you ran this like 2 more times, so now instead of cell count 3, it's cell count 4. And like, oh, that spatially enabled data frame that you had, oh yeah, you did a data frame output, and then you dared to save. So this is what a data frame looks like on the back end, right? It's just all text. And so if you had done an add data output and then saved it to version control, and then like your data changed, or you did something else, and then you had that as an output, all of these things could theoretically change, like the order of your data frame, right? If that changed, there's going to be huge diffs all the time. And if you have huge diffs all the time, it's going to be very hard for you to understand, like, hey, what changed and why. And then also you don't even have like the benefit of having git blame. So horrible. Horrible. Did I say horrible? It's pretty bad. And so that's why I was saving notebook cells individually into a .py file, because I didn't understand how you could have an effective version control on a notebook until jupytext. Jupytext is great. What jupytext does, oh look at that, y'all, a URL that worked. Oh snap. Okay, so we were just here, but that's okay. We were here. Okay. Okay, so what jupytext does is it is going to get rid of all of the, it's going to get rid of all the Jupyter things and just bring it into Python, right? So the cells are going to have this cell magic on them, and they're going to be commented out. And then if you have outputs, those outputs are just not even going to exist, right? So we called the variable name for a spatially enabled data frame, and then that would make an output of the data frame, but it strips all the outputs, so all it looks like is like, oh, you just called a variable without doing anything to it. Yeah, and that's fine. So now we are going to look at, here we go, jupytext, right? So jupytext requires a TOML, which is Tom's obvious markup language, and you just do a few parameters here, and this says, hey, we want to strip out all the metadata, and we want to strip out all the metadata from the cell. Oh, look at this. This is get blame, right? So this is the point of having version control, is that I know that in September of last year I version controlled this TOML, you know, or I updated the TOML to remove metadata. So wait, so there should be another one from not 8 months ago, right? There we go, 10 months ago, right? We added the jupytext configuration, right? So it was this first line, I think, yeah, and then 2 months later I changed these 3 lines. Anyway, so you're like, oh, I get it, I think. Okay, so when we have markdown here, it says, hey, this is a markdown cell, and then all the markdown is going to be commented out. So it's still readable inside of your Python file, it just doesn't look like garbage, right? So here's a little bit better markdown, right? And oh, look, I use a bold and an italic, and then a numbered list and some hyperlinks, you know? So I've got all these things, which makes version control actually make sense inside of your IDE, right? So here, look at this, like a small quality of life function for removing all features across our production survey 123. Look at that, how cool. Then maybe, add a targeted delete feature. Wow, it's, sorry, I shouldn't, it still blows my mind that I'm like trying to convince people to version control. Version control makes your life so much easier. Or maybe everyone has like perfect elephant memories and I'm like the only person that doesn't. And if that's the case, that's okay. Anyway, this is why version control is cool. And the other cool thing about jupytext, right, is that, okay, so I have inside of my git ignore Python notebook. So anytime I have a Python notebook, it's not going to save into my version control. My version control is not going to care that the state changes. So if I were to pull down a .py file, right, that had jupytext enabled on it, then when it gets in here, jupytext is going to pick it up and then build out the Python notebook from it. It obviously can't build out any of the outputs because it doesn't save the outputs, but here's all this beautiful markdown as it was intended to be. All of this spawned from this .py file, right? And so you have an artifact that's very transferable and that has diffs that make sense, and they can also be spawned into these beautiful little things, right? So here's add assignments from our election assets management, and this is for like ArcGIS workforce, and this is one of the things of like, yeah, I gave a notebook to a non-GIS employee to run this thing, right? And it's like, okay, so we have to have this Excel sheet that tells the people in what order they should pick up from the ballot boxes every day during an election. And so this person runs this notebook every morning, right? And that's cool. Anyway, so let's see, it's something else that's cool. I think, oh, look at this. All right, this is, oh man, it's a bookmark that works. You weren't joking? Yeah. So there's a little bookmark that works. I think I've got a better bookmark here. Yeah, so I've got this big one. No, not administer entitlements. I have MapX Sim Edit. So I'm trying to do this thing, and whatever. I'll talk about it next year. So anyway, so I'm building documentation not just for myself, but for any of my teammates that are like, oh, hey, I want to do the thing. It's like, oh, great, because what we're doing is a little complicated. So the way that I've written the documentation, right, is like, hey, if you want to just try out, like, what is the fundamental unit that we are working with here, and it's here, right? So it's like, oh, this is how you do the little thing. But then you're like, okay, I want to do the thing against all the things. It's like, okay, that's a little bit more. It's a little bit more, and then we start building like all of this like extra stuff to do all the things, and you're like, oh man, I wish I could fold this code. Oh snap, I can. Oh, how cool is that? Anyway, so yeah, I get sidetracked. But the idea then is, if they want to go to the actual big thing, right? It's like, okay, we'll go to the, oh, no, didn't work, I messed up. Oh, I know why I messed up, because it's not a sim apply, it's sim application. Okay, let's do this again. Oh, so cool. Anyway, so yeah, you get to get people to where they want to go, and then obviously I was not polite, and I did not do a return to table of contents on the thing, but that's okay. And what else? Administer entitlements. Again, just more beautiful documentation and some URLs and some further context for people to read, and a little heads up about, hey, why am I getting warnings when I run the admin license function? So that's why you're getting warnings. Anyway, so maybe I should have shown this in the beginning instead of like trying to describe the elephant. Should have just been like, hey, it's an elephant. But this is like why I love notebooks, is because they're tidy. They can be. They can be tidy and neat and super helpful, or they can be just as unhelpful as like a block of 1,000 lines with no comments, or like a block of 1,000 lines and 800 of those lines are comments, right? Like your .py files can look nasty, but they can't really look pretty. And a Jupyter notebook can look nasty, or it can look pretty, right? Or somewhere in between. Anyway, that's why we love them. And then what else is there's also, here we go, bookmarks, Jupyter. No, not there. It's here. It's in files. It's outline. Here we go. So we didn't even really need like, oh, I went through all the trouble of making a table of contents in the other one when all of these cells are already bookmarked, right? And you can run each of these sections individually, and I think that's cool. Anyway, so that's why I'm like, oh, your IDE is the best, and you should use your IDE. And it's because your IDE is the best, and you should use your IDE. Anyway, I think we've about made it. We've about made it to where we wanted to be. So if you wanted to know more, if you have questions, I love talking about this stuff, and I would love to talk to you about this stuff. Thanks for listening to this entire hour that I tried to cram into 20 minutes on a live stage. I think it was funnier. It was a lot funnier. I feed off the energy of the crowd, and I was a little bit better caffeinated that morning than I am this morning. Yeah. So, and if I've done some stuff wrong, please let me know as well. I am Plato's dog, you know. I hate what I don't know, and I want to know all the things. And if there's a better way to do a thing, I want to know. And I'm happy to eat crow, and I'm happy to make apologies, because I'm a human person, and I don't think that I know that no one's perfect, right? And I know that I'm not perfect, and we should all just stop pretending like we are. We should stop living the curated life. So that's my soapbox. Anyway, thank you so much. Again, this is like the dream presentation, well, maybe not this exact one, this was like a rough version of the dream presentation that I wanted to do. And the more I was doing it, the more I was like, man, I hate all of this. And I wish I could do like one part of this presentation, but super in depth, instead of like trying to cover like a huge expanse of stuff and make it make sense. Because it makes sense to me, but I also get that I have a kind of a unique little brain going on. Anyway, so that's that. Thank you so much for listening. If you listened all the way here, I appreciate it. And that's all I got. I love notebooks, and I hope that you love notebooks too. Oh, sorry. One last thing. One of the questions that I got from a member of the audience, right, was, hey, how should I get started with a Jupyter notebook, even if I'm not like super into Python, right? Like let's say I'm like one of those people of like, I can read Python, right? Or I can edit some Python if there's already Python in front of me, right? And you tell me like, hey, kind of fix this or whatever. If I can do that, right? And man, I feel that. I was there for such a long time, and anyway, while ArcGisPro takes forever to load, one of the things that like spurred me into action is, I will never forget this. I was sitting at Babe's Chicken Diner right after GIS conference, and there's this guy, Tim Nolan, shout out Tim Nolan, this stuck with me for forever. And Tim, he's like, man, at this point he's like the IT manager of one of the largest counties in Texas, and he has like this team of application developers and GIS developers. He's like, I really would love to meet someone that can just program, like, open up a blank screen and just write stuff. And like, I felt so righteously indignant when I heard that, like, that I can do that. I can open up a screen and just start typing and doing a thing. And like, maybe now that I've got a little bit more humility, maybe on my best day I could do that. But like, I'm just Googling all the time, and now that we have LLMs, I'm LLMing lots of things. And then I guess when I'm Googling, I'm also LLMing, because Google's just an LLM. Now, I don't know. We live in a horrible time. We live in the worst time, probably. Anyway, all this is a very roundabout way of like, hey, how should I start out with a notebook, right? And I get that I was like crapping on ArcGisPro the whole time and on ArcGisonline. But if you have access to ArcGisPro, this is what you'll open up an APRX, you'll go to New, and you go to Notebook, and it's gonna pop open a notebook, right? And then it's gonna take forever to load because this is the first notebook that's there. Whatever, that's okay. You can see why I really would prefer just about anything other than inside of ArcGisPro. But again, when ArcGisPro debuted notebooks, like, this is the coolest thing ever, you can have a notebook inside ArcGisPro. But I was also doing like a lot more of my work inside of ArcGisPro, and a lot of my work was ArcGisPro centric and mapping centric and analysis centric, and so like, yeah, I was jazzed. So what I mean to say is, this is legitimate in the same way that starting your automation journey by using Model Builder is legitimate. Using notebooks inside of ArcGisPro is totally legitimate. And don't let me gatekeep you. I don't want to gatekeep you, right? You don't ever have to import ArcPy, because ArcPy is already imported on the back end, right? Here, look at the history. No. Let me look at whose. Okay. When you open up a notebook inside of ArcGisPro, it will always import these modules, right? So you can always just call like ArcPy, and it's going to tell you, hey, instead of like, hey, there's no variable called ArcPy, it knows. So these are the things, so you don't have to like, whatever, import ArcPy. But it is good practice to go ahead and import ArcPy, because when you're in like a VS Code or an IDE, VS Code, is the IDE. Or in just like straight up Jupyter, ArcPy is not going to import by default. So it is just best practice to just go ahead and import ArcPy and import other things as you need them when you need them, right? Oh, here we can do that cool little thing we were talking about. So from pathlib, import path, right? And you guys saw me, I right clicked on the, well, you didn't see me, I was on my other monitor. I right clicked on my screen and on the taskbar and opened ArcGisPro, but using a right click. So I mean, like, oh, open up the notebook one, right? And so now we can do oh gosh, what is it? It's path. Oh. Solve. Here we go. Right. Oh, no module for a name pathlib. Is it? That's lowercase, right? That's a lowercase thing. There we go. It's like system 32. Oh, but other things that's cool here now, right? You can press like tab, right? And they're like tab completions. So that's cool. There's new things all the time. Anyway, I'm on 3.5. I have not upgraded to 3.7 yet. I'm going to. Yeah. So squirrel. Yes. So where should I get started? You should get started by right-clicking and opening up a notebook. And anything you were doing in the Python analysis window, you can go ahead and start doing inside your notebook. And if you need to have them both up, right, then you've got this really cool thing that you can go here and pop it open, right? And you can have both of them up at the same time. There's no rules. There's no rules against that. And if you're not even here of like, man, I don't even know about the thing, then go to your model builder and then export your model builder as a Python script and then paste that whole thing into here and then start taking sections out of it and running them in individual cells and, you know, digging into what all the things are doing, right? Or run a bunch of geoprocessing tools and then select them all and then right click and output that whole thing as a Python snippet. You can do that. So that is, you know, it's not like a trick question or a gotcha question. The ArcGIS ecosystem, you know, don't quote me, Jack Dangerman, don't you dare quote me. I will say the ArcGisPro ecosystem is really a great vehicle for learning Python, right? And it's like really incentivizes you to do it because you're like clicking less buttons. Like if anyone's wondering like, oh, Jordan, why like are you so into programming? It's because my first job, I drew cadastral parcels in Texas. We don't use township and range, and a lot of the deeds are in Spanish or in cursive from the 1800s, and it's bananas. And I drew enough of them. I drew enough counties, and I'm like, I don't ever want to click buttons again. So that is why I prefer typing. I just want to type the things. Anyway, so yes, right-click, output your geoprocessing tool runs as Python snippets, output your model builder as Python, and start sectioning them off into cells and then running them that way, right? And that's how you're gonna do things. And so that is how I would recommend starting. And when you're ready to, and if you don't have access to ArcGisPro, do the same thing in arcgisonline. Just use the baseline kernel because it won't cost you anything to run and do development. You are going to get charged for runtime if you're using ArcPy or the GPU enhanced ones. Anyway, very long, very rambly, but I did a Ratatouille themed presentation a while back, right? And the idea is that from the acclaimed film, right? Anyone can cook. I wholeheartedly believe anyone can cook, and I wholeheartedly believe anyone can code. So if you want to get better at it, just put in the time and ask the questions. And GIS people in general love helping other GIS people. So just ask your network. And if you don't have a network that knows anything about it, right? Or maybe maybe no one likes you in your new network, right? You can talk to me, right? So feel free to send me a message, send me an email, within reason, and I would be happy to talk to you about these things, because I love these things. And I know that the more that I give, the more that other people will have a chance to give and to pay that forward. So, okay, this has got real soapboxy. I'm done. I'm done. The end. Thank you so much. Notebooks are awesome. Please use notebooks. The end. Bye.